to Satsang. So beautiful to be together, to have this beautiful blessing of gathering in such a beautiful divine garden at the end of the day, to come together in this beautiful time. So glad you're all here. And we start as usual with a question that comes in advance, and then we'll open it up to any questions that anyone here has. Should we give money to beggars? It might do wonders for my karma, but could it negatively impact theirs? So this is one of the great justifications, rationalizations. We say, well, I'm not going to give money to the poor because clearly they must be poor for a reason. And so why would I want to interfere with what's the divine plan? No. And here's the thing about karma, divine plan, destiny. We're all interwoven. There are times in satsang where I've shared different stories from the scriptures of the way that different karmic threads interweave together. Whether it's Shravan Kumar and King Dashrath and Bhagwan Ram, like three individual lives, but how they weave together. Whether it's so many different stories that I won't go into now, but we've spoken about these in the past a lot. My karma means my action. So when we talk about it doing wonders for my karma, it's not the exact correct terminology in any case. Karma is just action. The results of that action are what we refer to as karmic fruit. And kind of the sum total of that becomes what we call our destiny. Right? All of our karma gives us where we are. Now, sure, someone's destiny, up until this exact moment, from the sum total of all of their past actions that created a whole variety of different situations, has led them to be poor and a beggar, in the same way that it has led you to be exactly where you are. Every one of us is exactly where we are in this moment because of the sum total of all of our past karmas. So you could say right here, right now, is our destiny. But somebody to be poor and hungry and homeless in front of you has now brought in a whole new element to it. Now the universe has put them into your karmic journey. Now it's no longer their own journey on some other part of the world, which of course, on the deepest level, is connected to us anyway. But here, on the most logistic, pragmatic level, they've essentially landed in your lap. You're walking down the street and someone says to you, "Please give me money." That's very different from someone being poor, seemingly disconnected to you. Okay? So now we've got their destiny interweaving with your destiny. And now the question is, what happens when someone says to us, when we're walking down the street or driving in our car, and we see someone who's poor, someone who's homeless, someone who's hungry? What happens inside of us? Well, if we're not jaded, and if we're not trying to convince ourselves that the spiritual way to be is disconnected and cut off and indifferent, our hearts bleed. Something inside of us happens when we see a starving, hungry, poor, homeless person. And if nothing inside of you happens, examine your life, because you've cut yourself off from your heart in some very tragic way. And chances are that's going to impact you in a lot of other places. If you can walk by a hungry person, a homeless person, and not have your heart break, it may be a good time to take a little bit of a break from the busyness and hecticness of your life and reconnect with your heart. Because it means that in your busyness, in your distraction, or in the achievement of whatever you've decided your life goals are, that you've actually disconnected yourself from life at the core that weaves through all of us, that river of life, that spirit that runs through all of us. So our hearts break. And that's exactly how it should be. That's how you know you're still human. The dilemma on a pragmatic level, number one, of course, is, well, most of us don't have enough money to feed everyone on the street. And so then you're in sort of this bind of, well, who do I feed? How do I do it? And you know, I take inspiration from children in this, because children have got a very, very beautiful way of not being cut off, not being disconnected, not having their hearts closed. And, excuse me, and when children walk down the street, what do? They give everything they have to the homeless people, right? Somebody talks to a child, especially if they're not used to it. I remember when I was young and we used to go from Los Angeles to New York for Thanksgiving holiday to visit my grandparents. Now in LA, and those times, this was 40 years ago, the homeless population was segregated from the non-homeless population much more than it was in New York. Now, homelessness in LA has gotten horrible and it's everywhere. But 40 years ago, you could live in LA for years and years and years and never see a beggar on the street. We then would go to New York for Thanksgiving, and the streets were full of them. And I remember, because I used to love, New York had something that LA didn't, which was the ability to buy things on the street. I mean, LA didn't have much of a street life, and it was, shopping centers and stores, but you had to get in the car and drive. And New York was, you'd walk down the street and there's the pretzel guy and there's the chestnut guy. And so I loved to buy pretzels, chestnuts. I was never a hot dog eater, but, the vegetarian options on the street. And what I always used to do was ask my dad to give me money, because I loved the independence of it. I loved being able to have my own money and buy my own, hot chocolate or pretzel. And inevitably, by the time we got to the first pretzel stand, I would have to turn and ask my dad for more money. And he'd always be like, I gave you a $20 bill when we started this walk. Where did it go? Or maybe he gave me, tens and fives and a mix, whatever. And inevitably, by that time, I had given it all out to every beggar on the street. And I wasn't unique in that. It's not about, look how different I was. This was how children are. When children come from abroad to India and see the beggars on the street, it's always a question. Can we feed them? Can we bring them home? It's how children's hearts are. And it's beautiful. And so I always take a lesson from that, which is give with an open heart. Give with the faith that kids have. Like, I knew I could give out every dollar in my hands, and then I would turn around and there would always be enough money for a pretzel. That I didn't have to hold on to anything in order to make sure I got my pretzel. And it's just such a beautiful way to have faith, that as we are confronted in our life with those in need, to be able to give without worrying about, well, oh my God, what about me? And just that awareness that in giving, so I will receive. That I'm just a trustee. I mean, nothing is mine anyway. It's just been given to me to do something good with. But on a logistic and pragmatic level, the dilemma becomes none of us has enough money to give to everyone or to give enough to everyone. And of course, then we end up with situations where you've got, mafia situations and things where it's not just kids begging, but actually a whole system of kids being utilized by mafia to get money. And this is what breaks your heart even more, and it's what requires us to be intelligent and not, for example, give money out of car windows in the middle of the streets of Delhi, where once you give money to one, 50 of them come in from the sidelines and rush into traffic that's now moving, and inevitably somebody ends up getting hit by a car. But just because we don't necessarily give everyone in every circumstance doesn't mean that we should close our hearts. We should not. We should actually hold on and value that heartbreaking. And if we can't give that one for some reason, like, I know this kid is part of the mafia, and the guy's, sitting on the bench over there on the side of the busy street, and if I do give this kid, 50 other ones are going to rush into a busy street of Delhi. But allow your heart to break anyway. Because in that broken heart, you will be inspired to do something for other children. You will be inspired to help, which we all must. And that's our calling. And so, should we give money to every single beggar we see? If you can do it safely, yeah, why not? I mean, who are we to decide who's deserving and who's not? There's a beautiful line in a poem by Khalil Gibran that says something like, and I hate that I have to paraphrase because he's so perfectly beautiful, I just can't remember exactly the line, but it says something like, if God, if the universe, if the divine has deemed this person worthy of their days and their nights, who am I to decide that they are unworthy of whatever I have to give? Like, who am I to decide who's worthy? If the divine has decided they are worthy of their days and their nights, surely they are worthy of all else from me. So, yeah, if you can give safely without kids rushing into a busy street, give. It'll help them and it'll help you. Don't think about it as for your good karma. Think about it as a way to keep your heart open in the midst of days that are so busy and distracted. Think of it as a way to remind you that we are all connected. And it doesn't mean you have to give them everything. Keep change on hand, keep fruit on hand, keep packs of biscuits on hand, whatever it may be. When I lived in San Francisco, and I would pass these homeless people every day on the way from this, not the subway, it was an above ground public transportation kind of train. I would keep, sandwiches and loaves of bread and things like that in my bag because I knew I was going to pass them. So just plan ahead. Keeps your heart open, keeps you connected. And don't worry about it negatively impacting their karmic journey. It won't, I promise. They've been put in front of you for a reason. And that reason is for both of you to benefit from that interaction. And lastly, if you can't give them money or food, maybe because you don't actually have any with you at that time, maybe because it is a busy street in a big city and you can't safely give it to them, don't avert your eyes. At least look at them. Don't pretend they don't exist. It's hard. It's hard to look at that and not do something. But that's critical for us. And it's critical for them. Even if you can't give them money, they are still human. And they deserve to be seen as humans. And even if you don't have something to give them, you can give them the gift of being seen. And you can give yourself the spiritual practice of seeing that which you can't change, but that which must be seen. And that's a really critical spiritual practice for all of us. So if I'm in Delhi and we're stopped at a light and someone comes up for money, I don't give it to them because I know it's not safe. But I make sure to make eye contact. I make sure to see them with as much as much love in my heart as I possibly can, and not to avert my eyes, not to pretend I don't see them, not to tell the driver to move ahead a little bit, because then we suffer and we lose, because we disconnect ourselves from life. And then we are depriving those who are already without so much. We're depriving them of their very humanity, of their ability to be seen. So at least give them that. Are there any questions that anyone here might have? What is? Just, if you say it in the mic, then those joining us online will also hear. It's on. It's on. Yeah.
Sadhviji, what is the meaning of true giving?
True giving. What is the meaning of true giving? I think true giving is two things, I think. Two different possibilities. One of them is we give of ourselves. We give truly of ourselves. And it might be our money. It might be our resources. But we give an amount and we give in a way that it impacts us, that it's not what is the bare minimum I can give without thinking about it. But we give really of ourselves. We give, if we're giving money or resources, we're giving in a way that requires us to be aware that we're really sacrificing something. We're giving of that which we have. And it's going to impact us in some way. Or maybe we give of ourselves through our time, through volunteering, through sharing our time, our abilities, our skills, either through doing work. Maybe we're stuffing envelopes for charity. Maybe we're designing websites or brochures. Maybe we are, rolling burritos or, working in a soup kitchen. Giving of time, giving of abilities. Maybe we're teaching kids to read, tutoring. Maybe we're reading to the blind, whatever it may be. But we give of our time or our skills, our energy. We give our love. Giving our love is one of the greatest gifts. People are hungry for love these days. Giving love. That presence in friendship, in understanding, in love, taking out time to take a walk with or have a cup of tea with or a meal with someone you know is going through a hard time, someone who's alone. So I think that's one way of real giving, is giving of our actual self to another. And I think the other way of real giving, in a way, is going to sound like the opposite, but they're both very deep spiritual practices, is giving simply as though we are nothing more but a channel through which giving is happening. So it's not I'm giving you of myself. It's not my money or my resources or my skills or my abilities. But it's giving as in I'm this empty channel, this empty vehicle through which it's happening, like through this microphone, satsang is happening. But at the end of satsang, the microphone's not going to get up and take a bow and say, wasn't I great? Because if the microphone had some kind of consciousness, it would be aware that it was just all it was doing was relaying sound. Or the camera or the internet, all these people joining us all over the world. The camera is not going to take a bow at the end of satsang and sort of expect everyone from all over the world to sing its praises for the satsang it provided. It understands it's a vehicle, it's an instrument. Satsang is happening through it. But in the same way, for me, as the mouth through which it comes, for me at the end, to take a literal or a metaphoric bow, to have this idea of, wasn't that great, is actually just as ridiculous. Because in the same way that the microphone is just a channel, the camera is just an instrument, well, so am I. For that which is being spoken, that which is being given by the divine. And so I think that's the other way to give. And whether it's our money or our resources or our skills, is this awareness that nothing is mine. Everything I have, everything I am is just a flow of grace. I just happen to be the vehicle through which it flows. It would be like the dirt on the riverbed of Ganga, saying, Acha, pranam karo mere ko. Do pranam to me, bow to me, pray to me. Why? You're dirt. Well, no. See, I'm the dirt. I'm the dirt bringing you Ganga, like I'm the riverbed. If I weren't there, you wouldn't have Ganga. I am the riverbed that brings Ganga to your ghat. And on some very literal level, that's true. But obviously, the whole thing is the grace of Ganga that just happens to be flowing through that riverbed. In the same way that whatever we are able to give is just the grace of the divine flowing through us, using us to give. And so I think that's the other way of real giving, is this awareness that I'm just being used. And it's so beautiful, and it's such a blessing to be able to be used like this, but not to be like the riverbed that thinks it's, the best thing in the world because Ganga chose to flow through it. But just to realize that it's blessed to happen to be the path she chose to flow. So I think if we use both of those, then that giving becomes deep and real. And a beautiful experience for us as the giver. Are there any other questions? Yeah. He's just going to give you a mic.
Sadhviji, pranam. I just want to know how to identify your true soul calling.
How to identify your true soul calling? Well, your true soul calling, we actually already know. To be one with God. It's like saying, what is the dharma of every drop of water on earth? Well, every single drop of water on earth, whether it's high in the glaciers or flowing through your sewer or anywhere else in the world, it's all heading where? Into the ocean. Every drop of water is moving toward that ocean. Whether through a river, a stream, through the groundwater, however it's moving, every drop of water ultimately is headed toward the ocean. Now, some of them may evaporate before they get there. In the same way that we may, leave the body and take a new incarnation before the soul actually attains that divine union. But the path, the calling, the dharma of every drop of water is to merge with the ocean. What is the dharma or the calling of fire? Well, to go back to the sun. Right? Fire, the flames always go up. Right? What fire does is it burns. But what's the direction it goes in? Up. Why? Its source is the sun. Water comes down, fire goes up. Our soul's calling, like every drop of water on earth toward the ocean, is to awareness of our oneness with God. The drop actually has to get there physically. We just have to get there in our awareness. To realize we are that drop. That the ocean is here, it is now. And it's only the veil of Maya, the veil of illusion, keeping us from it. So that's our soul's calling. Yes, each of us has individual karmic packages and dharmas to fulfill at different times of our life, even several different dharmas at the same time. But what's most important is to stay anchored in that calling of the soul, which is, how can I, in this moment, drop the separateness, drop the illusion, drop the ego, drop the story, and realize my oneness with God. That's what we're supposed to focus on. Every minute, every moment, how can I, in this moment, realize I'm one with God? When we talk about self-realization or God-realization, that's what we mean. These days, the New Age world has made it seem very complicated. And, for only a few $1,000s here and a few $1,000s there, you too can have a course in your soul's calling. this is just simply where business co-ops spirituality. You don't need a fancy school or fancy program or fancy course or fancy certificate to find your soul's calling. If you allow yourself to feel it, you can feel it every minute. It's what drives us. It's what drives us to love. It's actually, tragically, ironically, what also drives us to shop and to eat. Because we're constantly being pulled by that yearning of the soul to experience an expansiveness, to experience this sense of I'm not just this small being. And so every time I buy something, there's this sense that now I have expanded. It's very interesting. If you think about the motions that we do, sort of the felt sense experience after a shopping trip, right? It's always like, look at what I've bought. Like I've expanded. You see all these bags. Now they're all part of me. It's very interesting. It's always like this, right? All these new things. As though somehow I now encompass all of these possessions. And even though the vast majority of them are now going to go in the back of my closet and I'll never look at them again, the fact that now I own them, I have somehow expanded. It's one of the reasons why we stuff ourselves with junk food when we're depressed, miserable, frustrated, alone. I mean, why in the world would giving yourself a stomach ache make anything better? And yet, how many of us have found ourselves drowning sorrows in bags of cookies or chips or cake or pints of Haagen-Dazs or whatever it may be? Because aside from the sort of chemical numbing of carbohydrates, there's actually something much deeper that happens. As we take in, and there's a physical felt sense experience of actual expansion in the body, like my stomach is now full, even to the point of feeling like I'm going to burst, I actually feel like I have expanded. I'm no longer as small and alone as I was. See, now I'm one with that pint of ice cream. Now I've become one with the cake. And if you think about it, it's a very interesting drive, but it's all actually a spiritual drive. It's what leads us. It's what leads us into one-night stands and promiscuity. In depression, misery, boredom, frustration, we are looking for some way to feel expansive, connected. And so we end up in situations that we later regret. But if you see all of these circumstances, they're all situations in which we are looking to expand, but in ways that don't really make it happen. But that's the drive. The drive is that calling of the soul to not feel small and alone and separate. And whether it's through shopping bags or cheesecake or beds of nameless people. We are driven to find that expansion because it is the calling, and it's a calling that we are not attending to in the right way. And that's why spiritual practice, meditation, devotional practices, service, actually are such beautiful, real antidotes to so many of these unskillful ways of trying to feel like we are expansive. Because they actually give us what we are looking for in a way that's real, in a way that's true. So that's the calling of our soul. And now how we attend to it is up to us. And every one of us has the opportunity right here, right now. No certificate, no degree, no course, no nothing. To just be present with that longing. That longing of the lowercase s self. That separate self. To merge into the whole, the divine. And rather than shop or eat or, go on social media to feel connected, rather than any of those, allow yourself to actually feel that longing. Because that will drive you toward a spiritual practice. It'll drive you toward calling out to God. And then feeling the answer to that call. Have a beautiful, beautiful rest of your evening. A beautiful morning and day to our family joining us from all over the world. And so much love to you all.